Hello and welcome to It's Personal, the podcast which explores how to put the citizen at the heart of public service transformation. I'm Jess Bowie, the Editor-in-Chief of Civil Service World.
And I'm Jo Thomson. I lead customer transformation in the public sector for KPMG.
And we have got a treat for you coming up today. We are about to listen to a really interesting conversation I had with the Director of Smart Cities at Sunderland Council. And if you're wondering what that means, all will be revealed soon. But first, Jo, how are you? And given that we are It's Personal, I wonder if you have had any experiences with public services, good, bad or ugly, that you wanted to share today before we listen to the interview with Liz.
Well, since last speaking, I've had a few life changes. I have moved house and therefore a lot of contact with a lot of public services, both in England and in Scotland. And I have to say the majority of that contact's been really good and really positive. But I think when anybody moves house, doesn't matter where you're moving from and to, there's just so much that you have to organise, isn't there, in terms of all your change of address, change of circumstances, etc. And it was a very handy reminder for me with my sort of day job hat on, thinking about where it goes well and where it doesn't. And, you know, you look at case management as an example. One of the singular success criteria for moving house is people knowing what's happening at what stage in the process and being able to get that information at their fingertips. And if we look at public sector and the need to drive efficiency, a really good, strong case management and knowing what the customer is going through is really important. So our solicitors were brilliant. The people in the process were brilliant. But where it got stuck was when we were at the behest of a portal that didn't work for other people in the chain. That made the process so complicated and so time-consuming. It actually took 2 months longer to move house as a result. So I guess I'm fresh in the mind of thinking about things like that.
And I imagine it must be so tempting to sort of apply your thinking from your day job to every interaction you have with things like that. I was racking my brains actually to think of an interaction I've had with the state recently. And the only one I can come up with involves a playground right outside my children's school. They recently revamped this playground and we got to vote on which design. They offered 3 different designs and finally it's up and running. It's been closed for ages. It's up and running. It's the one they go to after school every day. It's lovely. It has one of those tunnel slides. And one thing that I noticed about the design of this slide is that it has these ridges on the outside of the tunnel, which is just like catnip for children who like to climb. And almost from the day it opened, children were immediately climbing on the outside of this slide, which is incredibly dangerous. And there are all sorts of concerned onlookers watching. My daughter asked me, "Mummy, can I climb on the outside of the slide?" I said, "Absolutely not." Turned my back and then turned around. She was climbing, she was scaling the slide. Really dangerous. I realised that I had the email address of a woman from Southwark Council's Parks and Recreation Department. And so I emailed her and I sent her a picture I'd taken of children swarming all over the outside of the slide very dangerously. She replied really quickly and said, "Thank you so much for drawing my attention to this. I'm going to message Hags," which is the playground, it's a horrible name for a playground designer. Anyway, this is all to say that I had an interaction with a named individual who answered me immediately and I felt very connected into my local authority as a citizen. So there you go.
Yeah, and respected for your time and effort and feedback.
Absolutely. Jo, before we get on to the conversation with Liz, I have noticed that it is spring outside finally, which means that it is that time of year again at KPMG, isn't it? Tell us what you guys have been working on.
So spring has sprung and we are in our 5th year of learning what citizens want across the UK. And we have just released our Citizen Experience Excellence Research for the 5th year in a row. So we now have 132,000 citizens' views of what matters most to them in public service.
Amazing.
And this year, 30,000 citizens told us what they want. And it's really interesting because despite some of the really good changes that we're seeing with our clients and in the marketplace and public sector, there doesn't seem to be a substantive improvement in citizen experience. what that points to is that they're not quite feeling the benefit of some of the good transformation work, service transformation work that we're seeing in public service.
That is very interesting. And I'm sure we will touch more on the report's findings after the conversation with Liz. But Sunderland, it strikes me as that their transformation is in a fairly advanced state, albeit on a kind of local level. So without further ado, let's listen to the conversation I had with Liz St. Louis, who is Director of Smart Cities at Sunderland Council. Well, it's great to meet you, Liz. Thank you so much for being with It's Personal today. Tell us a bit about how you got here. Give us an idea of your hinterland.
Okay, well, absolute pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for having me. Yes, I mean, I've been working in local government for all of my career, really, but I've always been really, really keen and really interested in working in kind of a very customer-centric role where we use, transformation and digital and data to really transform the lives of our residents and those people that we serve. I've been with Sunderland City Council now for 17 years. Incredibly lucky to have a really, really interesting role now.
Great. Yeah. And I'm looking forward to getting into exactly what that entails very soon. I've read some things that you've written, and you've described a smart city as one that uses digital and data technologies to improve people's lives. So I was just wondering if you could tell me, on a very human level, what does that mean for an ordinary resident walking around Sunderland today?
It could mean an absolute plethora of things, and that's the really important piece of our kind of smart city approach. We've built a whole systems approach, which starts with underpinning digital connectivity, upon which we can layer a whole host of different digital solutions, sensors, devices, applications, from which we get all of that really, really valuable data flowing that we can then use in many different ways to support our residents, our businesses, and those that visit Sunderland. So, for instance, just walking around the city centre, you can jump on our free Wi-Fi, you can stay connected to our free Wi-Fi. It's all connected to Eduroam, so if you're a student, you can connect to your own network and stay connected. You can then jump on our Sunderland app, which brings together a whole host of everything that's going on in the city. You can get offers and discounts, for instance, at the coffee shop or local restaurants, etc. Our sensor networks linked into that, our road sensor networks. So if you're coming into the city, you can see where may be congested, where you may need to allow a little bit more time to travel or maybe take an alternative route. If you're somebody that needs our support in Sunderland, you're elderly, you're vulnerable, we have over 6,800 properties now connected in some way through assistive technologies. So many, many different experiences.
I've got Back to the Future too in my head.
Not quite, but I mean, we all say now, don't we, that connectivity, it's the fourth utility. We just need it.
I want to ask you, Sunderland was named the UK's smartest city in 2024. What do you think made the biggest difference in achieving that recognition? And what does it signal about the city's journey so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think what makes the biggest difference in Sunderland, without a shadow of a doubt, is digital leadership. We have a real commitment in the city and a real understanding and recognition of the power that digital makes to our local communities. And that's made a huge difference because, we've got the leadership, the commitment to really drive forward everything on a smart city level. Having myself as a director of smart cities and as a senior level within the organisation, and of course, the resource that we've got to drive this forward. I think our approach has been massively different. We've built a self-sustaining model for our networks and our connectivity and our digital devices, our solutions, our data. And without a shadow of a doubt, our 20-year strategic partnership with Bolden Networks, who are our smart city partners. We entered into that partnership back in September 2021. So we're kind of 4.5 years in. And that's made a tremendous difference because that gives us the speciality, the capacity, the capability to deliver at pace and to deliver, huge improvements in terms of digital connectivity and technologies within the city.
Obviously, you guys won that accolade for being the UK's smartest city 18 months ago, which in the world of generative AI is eons ago. So I was just wondering if there have been any updates on exciting things that you've launched since you won the award. Are you doing anything with generative AI specifically?
Yeah, so we're starting to really explore AI. We've done a huge amount over the last few years in getting our data structured and our data in the right place. Part of our approach to smart cities is we've architected our own smart city data platform that holds all of our geographical and location-based data. So all of our data from things like Wi-Fi sensors, from all of our traffic and motion sensors, bin sensors, air quality sensors, etc. But we replicated that data approach across the council as well. So it now holds much of our personal and sensitive data that we need for various use cases. Getting all that data structured and in order has enabled us now to start to really experiment more with generative AI. So, for instance, every year we run a residence survey, and our residence survey, often some of the most valuable data is in the handwritten comments.
It can read the handwriting.
Yes, and it goes on to tell us the sentiment analysis. Was it a positive comment, a negative comment, a neutral comment? It tells us if there's any bias, subtle or explicit. And it also goes on to give us some recommendations for action. So across our data now, there's other areas where we're using things like machine learning in terms of predictive analytics and hotspots. So for instance, we have a data approach to support our multi-agency hubs, which are physical hubs in the city where the police, fire, and local authority officers from antisocial behaviour, etc., work together. And that's all about reducing crime and disorder and antisocial behaviour. And we provide all the data for those guys across multi-agency. And that does something through machine learning, which is predicting hotspots officers need to intervene with and tackle.
That's so interesting. And I had a question about those multi-agency hubs because, it's really, I remember interviewing the civil service chief people officer years and years ago, who was Rupert McNeil back then. And he was talking about, he had this dream that one day, beyond kind of the civil service places for growth, where you co-locate civil servants from different central government departments in hubs, he was talking about getting, not just civil servants, but as you say, emergency workers, fire, police, local council, all sitting together. And it sounds like you guys have actually done that in Sunderland, which is brilliant.
Absolutely. It's made such a difference, and the actual reductions in crime and antisocial behaviour have been phenomenal because of that co-location, that co-activity, but really importantly, using the data and evidence to drive that activity. So before we developed all of the data visualizations, the teams used to come together with kind of the data every morning and discuss the data, discuss what the data was telling them. Now the dashboards update every night, and every morning they've got the data there in front of them at the fingertips. And they can do things like set alerts. So if there's a particular area in a locality that they're interested in, it will alert them every time there's a crime or an antisocial behaviour report, etc., or a deliberate fire. And as I say, it's going on now to do hotspot detection as well. So, but it's always about co-working and co-production. So, for instance, building those dashboards, some of the team said, it'd be really helpful if we had the CCTV information included. So if there is a particular issue, we can see immediately, is there a CCTV camera in the area? But importantly, what the logs on that CCTV camera are saying. So we brought that data in, and that's been really, really valuable for them now.
That's amazing. And I just want to come back to your long-term partnership, which you mentioned with Bolden.
Bolden Networks, yes.
Because that seems really central to Sunderland's ambition. What does a 20-year collaboration allow you to achieve that shorter initiatives simply can't?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we always say you can't build a smart city overnight. It takes a lot of investment, and it takes a lot of years to leverage the true benefit of the investment of the networks. And thankfully, when we went out to market to seek a long-term private sector partner, Bolden Networks and the Canadian pension plan that underpin Bolden Networks, that's their model. They want to seek long-term investment where they can really see a fantastic return on investment. And that's why they were very interested in our partnership. So really what it is, it's a complete partnership. It's joint equity. We both put equal funds in to start. It's joint risk. It's joint reward. So we do both take risk on different initiatives, but we both take the reward. It enables us to sell services across our city and outside of our city as long as there's a link back. And it enables us as a council to buy back those services. It also acts really importantly for me as a public sector procurement framework. It's a legally, procured procurement framework. So I can buy any networks of any kind and any digital and data solutions that sit on those networks through our joint venture, through our partnership. But really importantly, because we do sell to others, we get more benefit across the city for our residents and our businesses. But importantly, that brings money into the JV, and then we can reinvest that money for the good of Sunderland and the work that we do.
The JV being the joint venture.
Yeah, contractual joint venture. And that's really important to us, because when you start to build out a lot of networks, a lot of solutions, clearly, you need money to refresh those networks and solutions. You need money to keep those running. And so it's really important, for us, that we've got this sustainable business model that helps us do just that.
You mentioned sensors earlier. Before I read about Sunderland Council, the only sensor that I had really heard of, and this was many years ago now, was those bins, the salt or the grit bins that told the council when they were getting empty. But I think you've got sensors in far more than just that. So could you give us some examples of the sensors that you've put on various bits of public infrastructure?
Yeah, sure. So as I said at the beginning, we've got traffic and motion sensors and pedestrian sensors out there. So we understand at a granular level the traffic that's flowing in and out of our city, the type of traffic, whether it's a pedestrian, a cyclist, a bus, a lorry, a car, the speeds and the direction of travel. We know how many pedestrians are on various high streets. We've got bin sensors, as you mentioned, for bin fill levels. Lots of environmental sensors, so sensors on lifebuoys. So if a lifebuoy's moved off its housing, it immediately sends an alert to one of our local services officers so they can go and put that back on its housing. But really importantly as well, going deeper, we have things like sensors to support mold and damp, to support residents in properties. So that's temperature and humidity sensors, but also sensors on windows. So it tells us there is humidity. For argument's sake, if a tenant's showering, are they opening the window to ventilate? And we can do tenant education, as well as obviously making sure that the properties are free of any mold and damp. And so that's been a really important piece of work that we've done, and we're just about to put that in more properties. But then right over to the other extreme, really, where we have 6,800 properties now, just over, where we have some form of assistive technology. So that could be sensors on doors to support early onset dementia.
What would a sensor on a door actually do, and how would it help someone with dementia?
Yeah, so if you've got early onset dementia and you may open your front door and walk out of it, it can alert, for instance, a family member to let the family member know the door's been opened and the person in the property may be leaving the property. So it can help support that. Likewise, it could be a small sensor that supports falls. So if somebody falls, it can alert again, the correct professional help to come and support that person.
It detects a sort of thump.
Yeah, it can detect movement and falls and doors opening and closing and things like that. You can also put sensors in terms of things like kettles and fridges to make sure people are drinking and they are eating. If you've got an elderly person living in a property and they haven't opened the fridge or used the kettle for a 24-hour period, then that sets an alarm bell, doesn't it? And that person may need some help. So there's all kinds of ways now we can support, all the way through to supporting, as I say, vulnerable and elderly people live safe and well in their own home.
That's so interesting. Let's say it's the vulnerable person who hasn't opened their fridge. Where would the alert go? Would it go to someone in the health and social care team, or would it go to one of their family members?
So that can be set up on an individual basis. I mean, clearly all of something that you're doing like this, where you're working with individuals and their families, you'd work with the family and the individual themselves to understand exactly how that needed to work. Modern technology today allows that message to go anywhere. So indeed, it could go to a family member, it could go to an alarm receiving centre, it could go out to, for instance, a social worker. So absolutely, there's routes that can be applicable to a certain family and their particular circumstances.
So you've said in the past that Sunderland used to be data rich but intelligence poor. What has been the real breakthrough in moving from collecting data to actually using it meaningfully?
Well, that's been building our smart city data platform, our architecture. It is all built in Microsoft technologies. It's an Azure stack. But working with our partners, what it's given us the ability to do is bring data together from many different data sources, aggregate that data, match that data. So is it the same Liz St. Louis, L St. Louis, Elizabeth St. Louis across many systems, match the addresses and visualize that data in a way that presents insights to people in a very accessible way. So that's been the real game changer for us, having the ability to do that and having the ability to automate a lot of that now. So we did used to try and bring data together, but it was very manual, having to try and do that in spreadsheets and so on and so forth. We now automate those pipelines coming into a central data point. We engineer that data under the hood. So we do all the matching, and then those data flows are ready for visualization. And as I say, we can set all of that up so it's running and refreshing nightly or weekly or whatever the use case needs it to be. And I think the other point you mentioned before, you sounded surprised when I said we were reading handwritten notes, but that's the other thing now. So it can take structured data from case management systems, for instance, the social care system, the education systems, the benefit systems. It can take in Excel spreadsheets, it can take in PDFs, it can take in handwritten notes. So again, for adult social care, we are reading into the system the handwritten notes, sometimes that social workers and occupational therapists take. And through that and through the generative AI, you can do things like predicting patterns and trends. If somebody's gone into a nursing home, what might have been those steps, that deterioration journey for somebody before going into a nursing home or being admitted to hospital. So we've always had, and local authorities do, we have so much data because we have so many systems collating data all day, every day. But to get into those systems, to understand that data, to read that data, and to read that data across multiple systems has been outside really of our control. Now we can do that, and we can do that in a very automated way.
That's amazing. I wanted to ask you actually about sort of more old school technology. I'm not sure I've ever said this word out loud, so you'll have to correct me if I'm mispronouncing it. Telephony.
Yes, absolutely.
So obviously not everything you guys are doing is self-serve. A lot of it is, but you've also invested heavily in telephony too. So why is maintaining that human first contact still so important when 60% of your interactions are now digital?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, not everybody can partake in a digital world for whatever reason. And as a city council, we want to be able to be there and support people and give choice. And sometimes particular interactions, even if somebody is digital, it still might be better doing that over a telephone or face to face, particularly if it's a really, really complex issue that somebody has. We have people presenting homeless, for argument's sake. They turn up at a council door. So in terms of our customer access strategy for how we support our residents and our service users when they come to us, we'll always maintain a front door face-to-face, very small face-to-face presence for when that's necessary, a telephone service, a contact centre to help people who do need to phone us. And then clearly we invest heavily in our digital channels because that supports the majority of our residents. And of course, digital channels are there 24/7 for people. So they can be very convenient for people that work different patterns or like to report things late at night or whatever it may be when the council offices are closed. But it is important to us to retain that all-round choice. And sometimes people with accessibility needs, they find it easier to transact with us in different ways as well.
Yeah. Well, I actually wanted to follow up about digital inclusion because another thing that I wasn't aware of until I started reading about Sunderland was data banks. You guys have 37 digital hubs and a network of data banks which help reduce digital exclusion. Can you tell me a bit about those and what you've learned about meeting people where they are, especially people who are hesitant about getting online or unable to get online?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, digital inclusion is really, really at the heart of our smart city strategy. We always talk about leaving no one and nowhere behind, and we have a really active digital inclusion programme to support that. So we were very lucky to be awarded some UK shared prosperity funding. And with that funding, we decided that we wanted to get out into the heart of communities, and we wanted to work with our voluntary and community sector, fantastic sector in Sunderland, really, really active. And so what we did was we equipped voluntary and community sector buildings with good connectivity, which they didn't necessarily have. We popped in those voluntary and community sector buildings PCs. And we arranged a programme of what we call TechMates volunteers to go in and support people out in communities, because just providing connectivity and devices, it's a big step forward. But if people don't know how to use those devices, then how to get online, how to create an email account, etc., they need that support. So our TechMates go round the city, work one-to-one with those individuals to help residents get online and be confident online and stay online. And so that's been a huge part of our strategy. And of course, 37 across the city means they're out in the heart of communities. It could be a church hall, it could be a community centre, it could be a scout hut, anywhere where people go where we can support them. 6 of those actually are equipped with esports equipment. So Sunderland is the home to the National Esports Performance Campus. And we've got a fantastic venue, a couple of fantastic venues in the city centre, but we wanted again to get esports out to the heart of communities. So we supported 6 of those hubs.
You'll have to tell me, what is esports?
It's people going online and playing games online. And it's very big business. It's one of the fastest growing businesses anywhere in the world, I believe. So to have that in Sunderland's phenomenal. But if you're, a child living in one of our outer communities, it can be a long way into the city centre. So to have those equipped as well. So people can go in those digital hubs, they can get free access, they'll support children doing the homework that might not have access at home. They'll support people looking for job opportunities. They support people, getting onto the NHS app and things like that. They support people looking for financial support, maybe benefits that they're not claiming that they're entitled to. But indeed, things like searching for cheaper gas and electric tariffs and things like that, that's really, really important. And we have some fun as well. So we'll do things like tech tea parties and things like that to help people get online. So those 37 digital hubs, like I say, are out in the heart of communities, really, really successful. And again, data is really important because we have people counters there. We monitor the Wi-Fi sessions so we can understand which of those hubs are doing really well, which maybe aren't, and therefore we might need to do a little bit more publicity or support those hubs so we can just make sure they are running as effectively as they can. And then data banks really important as well, because sometimes people have devices, but they just can't afford the SIM cards, etc. So we have a number of data banks now all around the city where people on low incomes, on qualifying benefits, can go and literally get a SIM card and be able to then connect. Again, can give them huge opportunities, really, really important to us.
So we are almost out of time. I've got 2 more questions. You have described a move towards prevention via all these digital innovations. So spotting signals early across areas like housing and social care that can stop people spiraling into difficulty. How close are you to the point where data can genuinely help stop people from reaching a crisis point?
That's a big question, but I think actually we're there. We've got the data, we've got the systems, we've done a lot of work as a local authority in culture change, in training and investing in that for people, officers to be able to use that data and information. We've got some great case studies and examples through our occupational therapists and our social workers where preventative technologies, assistive technologies have really supported life changes for individuals. And so I think we're there. For us, it's about being much more systematic with that now. And generative AI and the onset of generative AI allows you to do that so much more by doing all of those things like spotting the trends, the patterns, allowing you to do that predictive analysis, allowing you to understand what your caseloads might look like in the next 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, and resource appropriately for that, and so on and so forth. So I think we're there in terms of just about being able to do it and continue the journey of supporting people in terms of that approach as well.
Do you ever have any pushback from kind of civil liberties campaigners, or does anyone ever accuse Sunderland of installing a Big Brother state? I mean, obviously, this is not my view, but I'm just playing devil's advocate. And if you do get those kinds of claims, what do you say to those voices?
Occasionally you get concerns raised by residents or organisations, but we've been very, very transparent along our journey with everything that we do. Information's out there. Everything complies with all of the legal requirements. We had some queries about our 5G networks, for instance, in the early days, but everything was published, all our safety certificates, all of our compliance with EU regulations, etc. We never bring anybody into, for instance, an assistive technology world unless we had complete consent from the individual or their family. And when we're doing things like the traffic monitoring or pedestrian sensors on high streets, it's about objects, it's not about people. The Wi-Fi doesn't know it's you. The Wi-Fi knows a device is connected to the Wi-Fi today. So it's really important to us. We absolutely make sure with all of our data work that we're GDPR compliant. We're doing data privacy impact assessments. We would never share data unless there's a legal gateway to do so or customer consent. And it's just about being very genuine, transparent and authentic with what we do. And therefore, when we do get a concern raised, we can respond very appropriately, which usually satisfies the requester very quickly.
And so my final question is for other councils who are keen to improve citizen experience through digital technology, but who are unsure where to begin. What is the one piece of advice you would give to someone in a similar role to you, just starting out? And what do you wish you had known at the start of Sunderland's smart city journey that you know now?
You've got to have digital leadership. You really do. You've got to have the digital leadership and commitment from the organisation. And I think you can have really well thought out plans and visions, but if you don't have that leadership, you're going to really struggle taking a bottom-up approach. So my advice would absolutely be, think through what it is you're trying to achieve and why. Why does that make a difference for you in the city or the town that you live in? Just make sure you really do gain that leadership approval before starting a journey. Of course, we do huge amounts of engagement and collaboration with other local authorities. Other local authorities are doing some great stuff. We learn from them, they learn from us. But we always come back to the leadership position being so key and so important.
Well, Liz, I think that's a great note to end on. Thank you so much for giving us your time and teaching me so much about what's possible. And I hope you'll stay in touch with It's Personal.
Certainly will. It's been my pleasure and thank you for having me.
So that was me in conversation with Liz St. Louis from Sunderland. And I had to kick myself re-listening to that because I do know what esports are, but I had temporarily forgotten. Made me sound like a bit of a Luddite. But you heard quite enough of me during that conversation. So, Jo, I'm really keen to hear your reflections. What are your main takeaways from what Liz was saying?
Well, like you, I was completely inspired by the practical reality of what Sunderland City Council has done. So I was just thinking about how relevant some of the things that Liz and the team have been doing around our three key themes of remember me, recognise me and respect me. So let's just focus on remember me. The citizen view is that we want to be remembered. We want our history to be remembered and our preferences so that we don't have to start again every single time. And what Liz was talking about, taking structured data from case management systems rather than having to shove it into an Excel or trying to transcribe handwritten notes and it being incredibly painful from an adult social care perspective. Through generative AI, she's been able to predict patterns and trends to really support. The example she shared was around elderly people going into hospital. So powerful and a really good use case of remember me. Something I've heard a lot, especially with reference to fraud detection, is whether a system is able to differentiate between Jess Bowie, Miss J.S. Bowie, J. Bowie, are they all the same person? And I think it sounds like Sunderland has really got a handle on joining up data in that way. What were some of your favourite examples of public service transformations that she talked about? I think all the examples that she gave around how they're using sensors was, wow, what an amazing thing to have done. And it particularly resonated from a recognise me perspective. So that's our second R in the 3 Rs of our citizen experience excellence research. And recognise me is all about tuning into the needs of our citizens, personalising where we can, and that's not always possible, but personalising to that moment in time. And if you look at some of the sensors that they've put into place, particularly for housing tenants, and being able to acknowledge when there might be a challenge with mold and damp, and educating customers to ventilate more effectively, or the early onset dementia use case that she talked about.
Yeah, putting sensors in kettles and in fridges. I thought that was so interesting because I know people whose parents are living on their own and do have early onset dementia. So I was thinking I'm actually going to tell them about, do you know that you can kind of check that your elderly mother is eating or drinking?
And from a recognise me perspective, that's exactly what we're trying to achieve here. It's about achieving a better outcome for the individual by tuning into their needs, because what they're able to do there is direct that professional support before it's needed, rather than dealing with the effect. They're looking at the cause. So incredibly powerful.
And what about your final R? Was that respect me?
So our final R remains to be focused on respect me, which is where citizens are saying they want fairness, dignity, and empathy. One of the big sort of lessons we've learned in this year's research is that respect is about combining the efficiency of digital, because that's what we're all about today, but with the humanity of people. And therefore, as a result, I absolutely loved what she was talking about with the 37 digital hubs.
Yes, yeah.
To help reduce digital exclusion. And I particularly enjoyed hearing that those were across government services, if that makes sense. So you could go there and do your homework, or learn about benefits, or learn about digital application across a range of government services. But they're in the community. So there's that face-to-face contact point. So you're retaining the respect there, but at the same time, you're maximising and amplifying digital efficiency where it's appropriate and relevant.
Yeah.
Hugely powerful.
And I didn't know about data banks for people who might not be able to afford data on their phone and things like that. So I thought all that was very interesting as well.
So I guess one final thing from this year's research, which maybe is worth focusing on, is, how do we genuinely get a shift to drive better citizen experience? Therefore, what we've done this year is just analysed a bit of a hypothesis around some of the root causes. And we come up with 8 levers that people are telling us are really important. And clearly Liz was talking a lot about integrating data and systems being at the heart of really good service transformation. But I loved how she signed off with this rally cry around leadership. And that's one of our 8 levers, which focuses on culture and capability transformation. And what people are telling us is that for a really good digital delivery in today's modern world to be sustained, it's about shifting organisational culture, developing digital literacy and skills across all of public service, but with the leadership commitment towards it. So she was talking about digital leadership being at the heart and getting that commitment before you get going on your big service transformation programme. That really resonated with me. If I ask every leader, what's the fundamental key success criteria beyond data, it's about leadership commitment.
Absolutely. Yeah, unfortunately, that is all we've got time for today. But do make sure to add us to your podcast feed. And do get in touch with any thoughts, experiences, or questions that you would like to share. You can do that by dropping me or Joe a message on LinkedIn, or by emailing csw.editor@civilserviceworld.com.
Thanks very much for listening to It's Personal, and see you next time.